Congratulations, Jake.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Hi, guys. Very excited to sit down with you. Journalism does matter, and facts do matter. I completely agree, and we agree at Rolling Stone and at Variety very much that that's the case. And I want to start with something that's very newsy. You're on your way here in New York. You stopped by from D.C. Is it my mic?
I don't know. There's a feedback going on.
There's a little bit of feedback. Is that...
It's outside? Oh, it's just construction. Welcome to New York.
It's coming from the city of New York. Welcome to New York. You're on your way to Anchorage, where you will be at the Trump-Putin summit tomorrow. What do you expect will happen at this meeting?
I don't know. I have a completely open mind about this, honestly. I mean, anything could happen. I mean, I'm prepared for anything to happen as we anchor several hours of coverage in Anchorage tomorrow. I think the question is, I know that there are outlets on the right that are prepared to anoint the new Winston Churchill, and outlets on the left, they're already to anoint the new Neville Chamberlain, and I just don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, it would be great if the war in Ukraine ended. Not obviously, but I think it is true that if Vice President Harris were the president right now and there were some attempt at a peace process, there also would be talk of Ukraine conceding land. That is just a fact, as Democrats will acknowledge. But how much does Ukraine have to give up? Will Putin allow for security guarantees? You've seen and heard a shift in how President Trump talks about Putin. I think he thought he was going to be able to get a lot more out of him than he's been able to. He himself said that he's described what Putin has told him as bullshit. He'll say, like, oh, yeah, I want to end the war, and then he'll bomb a retirement home in Ukraine. So I don't know. We'll see. I think that it is important that there is a lasting peace, more so than there is any sort of deal that can, be heralded as an achievement if it's not worth anything. So, but my mind is completely open.
When you say there's a shift with Trump's rhetoric, how do you as a journalist differentiate between shift in rhetoric versus shift in actual demeanor or policy?
It's a great question, and I was thinking about this when all those impressive younger journalists were here earlier, which is there is what Trump says publicly, there is what Trump posts on Truth Social, and then there is what Trump and his administration do. And those are three different things, and it's not always easy. I personally think what he does is the most important. And what he posts on social media in the middle of the night is the least important. But that's not to say that that's not important and this is always super important. So I don't know. All I know is, he has said more negative things about Putin in the last month than he has in the previous 8 years. So I don't know. I know that he, regardless of this talk of how much he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, I do genuinely believe he would like the war to stop. And I just think the question is what concessions will be made for that cessation of hostilities.
Talk to me a little bit about how you, being on air 10 to 11 hours a week on CNN, how has the coverage of Trump changed, would you say, in his second administration versus when he was president the first time?
Well, quite significantly for any number of reasons. I think, first of all, the social media posts got more coverage in the first term than in the second. I think that there's a number of reasons for that. One is just experience. Two is the squirrel aspect of his social media posting, right? And I think we've all learned that. I don't know how many people he even know, but a couple of weeks ago, he called for Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship to be stripped. Raise your hand if you'd heard that. Okay, well, this is a smart crowd, that's a crazy thing to say, but is it deserving of being the lead story? I don't know. It's certainly unhinged, but also, is he actually doing anything about it? And how much of that is just him trying to distract from Epstein files or inflation ticking up or whatever? So, I think hopefully it's just more experience in terms of us following the actual actions. I also think that the people he has around him now are, there's no guardrails, none at all. And B, also they were planning in the diaspora. For 4 years they prepared for this, assault on the government, this transformation of the government that they wanted to do, and so they were much more efficient in that way. So it's just very, very different. Also, there is now an entire. There was a right-wing ecosystem before, but now there is a media ecosystem, but now there is more of one that has been created where you have, the president's daughter-in-law has a show on Fox. Secretary Duffy's wife is an anchor on Fox, and on and on and on. And, you can go to, she had a show before, Rachel Campos Duffy was there before her husband was a secretary. But my only point is just, and that's not even the worst examples of people in this administration basically only talking to their people, or almost only talking to their people. I think in the first term, you could get an interview with the president or the vice president, and now it's much, much more difficult unless you are a right-wing podcaster or you work for Fox or Newsmax or whatever. So, and let me just say, I don't think that's healthy, whether it's a Democratic president doing that on the left or a Republican president doing it on the right. I think it's unhealthy, and I think it is exacerbating the divisions in our country.
Let's hear it for that. Certainly. And also, you want a journalist to be impartial. You don't want a journalist to have an agenda. It's not journalism if they go in there and ask questions and they're a fan of yours, right?
I don't think, that has existed since America started, and the newspapers, the broadsheets were partisan. But the question is, who does it serve for, let's just say, Secretary X to only talk to the choir, to only preach to the choir? Who does that serve? It doesn't serve, I don't think it serves that secretary, and I don't think it serves the people who maybe didn't support them or have questions about them or who don't watch that channel. I just think but yes, obviously there are tougher questions to ask. And I think that as long as they're, within the realm of reality based, they should be asked.
There's a perception that during the first term, journalists were more critical of Trump and networks were more critical of Trump. What is your take on that? Even within CNN, there was a perception that CNN was more critical toward the president then than they are now.
I think it's fair to say that the tone of, I'm not going to talk about CNN in particular, but I think it's fair to say that the tone of the coverage is different now. Two of our primetime anchors back then are no longer on CNN, Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. So obviously their points of view are not on CNN. But beyond that, I think that I do think that there was a degree to which sometimes in the first term, some of the criticism crossed a line. Not substantive criticism, but personal criticism. And I don't think that's healthy. I think that we are here to call balls and strikes. And if everything is a crisis, then nothing is a crisis. And how seriously is anybody supposed to take the analysis of tomorrow's summit from somebody who's running around calling him Neville Chamberlain or Winston Churchill, right? We need to try to cover him and who he is and what he's achieving as fairly and honestly as possible. That means sometimes positive coverage, and that means sometimes negative coverage. And I just think that I don't think it's softer. I just think it's different. And I do think that some of the coverage last time in the first term might, and again, I'm talking about a minority of it, but I think it does shade stuff. I don't think the coverage is all that different, but I think some of the coverage back then did cross a line.
He's also a very media savvy president. He knows how to distract journalists. He knows how to change the narrative. He knows how to talk about Rosie O'Donnell to get headlines maybe that are the less favorable headlines.
I think that would have gotten much more of a headline in the first term.
Why?
Than it gets now. Because of what he's doing with tariffs and what he's doing with immigration and what he's doing with universities and what he's doing with the Middle East and what he's doing with, there are all these incredibly life or death situations that are going on that deserve intense critical analysis and coverage. And no offense to Rosie O'Donnell, but I don't think that a late night Truth Social post, that's the other reason that we don't cover it as much as who's on Truth Social. Probably not a lot of people in this room, but except to cover his tweets or posts. But in any case, like it's not that that's not outrageous. It is, but just there needs to be some perspective, I think.
Who here has read Original Sin? Raise your hand. Congratulations, Jake.
Thank you. Not a huge.
Please.
Well, it was a bestseller for 7 weeks.
It was
so
a
I'm
bestseller.
Sorry. You're
Come on,
missing
guys.
out. You're missing out.
You moderated the presidential debate that changed American history. Can you take us back to last summer and what it was like?
I don't know
being
if this
in that
room can take it. You guys want to hear what it was like to be there in the debate room that night? It was. I saw what you saw, except it was 15 feet in front of me, and it was shocking. And I thought, oh my God, it's much worse than I thought. And yes, President Trump, then former and future President Trump, but Donald Trump was there doing what Donald Trump does. A lot of bluster, a lot of lies, lots of stuff. Although, given what was going on to his left, he was fairly restrained about what was going on to his left. I'm not saying he deserves credit for it. I'm just saying, like, in terms of his savviness, when your enemy is blowing himself up, get out of the way. I mean, it was shocking, and I do think to this day the Democratic Party needs to reckon with the fact that because they were so convinced that Donald Trump was an existential threat to the country and that Joe Biden had convinced the party that he was it, he was the only one that could beat him, the party was going along with somebody who was not capable certainly not capable of being president for another 4 years. I mean, raise your hand if you think he'd be capable of being president until January 2029. Yeah, you put your hand down as soon as I finish the question. Yeah. Yeah, but also incapable of running the kind of vigorous campaign necessary to win. And I think that the Democratic Party, for that reason, hid about I'm not saying he's not capable of sitting here and doing a 20-minute interview with you. I do think he would be in the middle of the day, but I don't think that he was capable of the most important job in the world, and I think a lot of stuff was hidden from the public and from the media, and it was shocking to see in person. It was shocking to see when I was writing the book with Alex Thompson, who was here earlier, and I had to do the chapter on the debate because I moderated it. And rewatching it, it's just shocking, that first answer where he completely loses his train of thought. It's sad, is honestly what it is. As somebody who has parents in his 80s, it's sad. We had iPads in front of us so that we could communicate with the control room, because obviously we're mic'd, we can't talk. And I wrote in that first answer where he ended up with, "We finally beat Medicare," or Medicaid. I wrote, "Holy smokes." Because I didn't know who was in the control room. It might have been somebody important, and I couldn't curse. But I was thinking, holy fuck, like, what is going on? This is shocking. And it wasn't a cold, and he wasn't overprepared, and he wasn't underprepared. This was an 81-year-old man who, like a lot of 81-year-olds, had good moments and bad moments.
So in the room, in the moment, obviously there's some things that translate worse on TV, better on TV, but in the room it felt like you could tell that the entire nation was probably in shock.
I didn't know how it looked to the rest of you. I was stunned. And you never know how something looks on TV. The camera adds 10 pounds, whatever. I didn't know how stuff was coming across. Like, for instance, Al Gore's, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Al Gore sighing kind of petulantly in the first 2000 debate with George W. Bush. He would do like a... And that didn't come across in the room as much as it came across on TV. Same thing with the Dean scream in 2004. Like, you couldn't hear it in the room, but on TV, that sounded weird. So I didn't know how it was playing to the world, but it was awful. It was sad. Like, it truly was sad to watch, because he really was struggling. And I thought to myself, like, the first thing I thought is, when I'm walking out there, I'm 56, so this is a younger crowd. But I'll tell you something, when you hit 50, sleep becomes something that you really like and look forward to. Like, it's not something to be avoided. You're like, oh, it's 9 o'clock, I can think about going to bed. And as I was walking in that night to the stage, and Biden had shown up way late for the walkthrough, which was another weird thing. But that's all in the book, Original Sin.
Read it.
I walked in, and I thought it was 8:45 East Coast time, and I thought, I am tired, and I'm ready for bed, and I'm going to have to be here until 10:30. And then President Biden walked out at 81. I'm like, oh, what's it like for him? And he's, as Alex Thompson had broken a story in April 2023, like, they really did try to keep his schedule like 10 to 4, his public schedule, because as you get older, you get sleepy.
Another difference in Trump's second term is that he is using the legal system and lawsuits as a weapon against journalists. And I want to talk.
And he has a lot more friendly judges now than he did 8 years ago. Yeah.
Because of the appointment of judges that are more friendly to his administration. How does that affect you as a journalist, knowing what happened with 60 Minutes, knowing the settlement, knowing that there is more threats of lawsuits, whether or not they're legitimate or not is a question I think people have. But how does that affect the way you conduct yourself as a journalist?
Well, I will say this proudly underneath the Paramount Plus banner, which is that lawsuit was bullshit against 60 Minutes. It's editing is something that is done all the time. I have on air pointed to an interview that Donald Trump did in 2024 on Fox with Rachel Campos-Duffy, in which she asks him about the Epstein files. She asks him about a bunch of things. Will you release the JFK tapes? Files? Will you release this, that? And the Epstein files, he kind of balks. He kind of walks it back. He says, yes. And he's like, but there's a lot of nonsense in there. What they aired on Fox, which is not governed by the Federal Communications Commission, by the way, because it's cable. What they aired on Fox was just a decisive, yes, I would do that. But the longer taped interview, he kind of walks it back a little bit. That is a more egregious example of editing than what 60 Minutes did with Vice President Harris's answer on the Middle East, which was basically a minute-and-a-half word salad that they used some of for the promo and then some of on the show, and there was no bias in there. It was just trying to have an interview and trying to give the cleanest answer that you could give in an interview that's like an hour interview that you're editing down to 7 minutes. That lawsuit was nonsense. And the only reason that our good friends up there settled is because they wanted the merger to go through. Which is almost a bigger issue than the lawsuit, because I think that CBS News would have won that lawsuit, Paramount would have won that lawsuit, but it wasn't about that. It was about fealty, and this is one of the risks you have when you have a for-profit media, when you have commercial media, which is that there are going to be people who their job is to keep the company afloat. And their job is to keep stockholders happy. And so that is a risk in this era, regardless of Donald Trump or not. I read somewhere that First Lady Melania Trump is now threatening Hunter Biden with $1 billion defamation suit because he had, I'm not even going to repeat what he said, but it was some crazy accusation having to do with Jeffrey Epstein and Melania. In any case, look, we especially in the media should be very careful that everything we're saying we can back up, and we're clear about the facts, especially when it's something investigatory. But that hasn't changed. I always felt that, and the lawyers at CNN felt that way. There is now a thirst among some to sue media organizations, not for the purpose of justice or correcting the record, but to bankrupt media organizations. So that is a real thing. And in this era, I think people need to be careful about it. But I don't think that should change our allegiance to facts and the truth and making sure that we talk to the other side of the story and all that.
Great answer. I could talk to you for another hour. Unfortunately, we only have one question left. And so I want to end with how, covering the news, you've been doing this for a long time, how do we ensure that people can tell what is true versus what is not? There's so much talk about AI. There's been so much talk about fake news. Social media is hard now to decipher what's real and what's not real. You watch a video, you don't even know what really happened. How do we ensure that the future generations and the public gets the news and gets truthful information?
There needs to be, I think I come down to this, which is the job is who, what, when, where, why, how. That's the job. And if you're not asking for comment from the people you're writing about, you're making a mistake. not only because you're not being fair, but because you might not be writing the first best draft of the truth. I saw a story, and I don't want to pick on the publication, and I don't want to pick on the intern that wrote it, but there was a story this week about Governor DeSantis in Florida. It's not anybody behind me. Governor DeSantis in Florida executing more veterans than ever before, even though he promised he'd be good to veterans. And it was a story about that, and didn't mention that the veterans were serial killers, right? Now, that intern, I feel bad for, because there needs to be an editor supervising this thing. But when you write a story about somebody on death row, you need to explain why they're on death row, right? It's not just this is this is an execution, and maybe you personally oppose the death penalty, whatever, that's fine. But the why is that person on death row, is part of the story. And leaving out facts that don't adhere to a narrative is not journalism. All of the facts need to go in there. And the more that we do that, putting in all the facts, putting in, well, this is their point of view on this. This is the other side. This is why people are upset by this. Even if the people are not people that you agree with. We need to do more of that to win back the trust of the American people.
And there's never been a more important time to practice good journalism. Jake Tapper, thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Congratulations.